Okay, it's about 2 minutes after now, so we'll go ahead and get started because we have a pretty full schedule today. For everyone that's in the session already, we want to welcome you all to the final session in our Hannah Resource Group Zoom series, Job Hunting in a Pandemic, a Survival Guide to Rejoining the Workforce. My name is Casey Williams, and I will be introducing today. For those of you that are new to our sessions, this is the last of 5 sessions where we will dive into the most critical aspects of the job search you will need to focus on to set yourself up for success. We see this as a journey broken down into logical areas to help you stay the course as you move from an applicant to a candidate to an ideal state as a candidate with a job offer. If you missed any previous recorded sessions, do not stress. All of those recorded sessions will be available on our website at hannahresource.com, along with the previous slide decks as well. Because this is a free series, we do encourage you to continue to share with your network and invite those who you feel may benefit from our sessions. So since this is the final session, if anyone that was unable to attend, if you can just direct them to hannahresource.com, all of that information will be there for them to review. A couple of reminders today before we do get started. We will have everyone muted during this session to ensure that we can continue with the pace. We have a lot of content to cover, and we want to make sure that we're able to get everything, all of the information to you guys through this session. We encourage your participation throughout by directing your questions to the chat box, which is located on the bottom portion of your screen. We will be monitoring that and assure to address any questions throughout and at the end in our question and answer portion of the session. Now we're ready to go ahead and dive on into what today's topic will discuss. In today's session, we will give you more insight into job offer decision making, choosing the right job during uncertain times. So you have an offer, but is this the right one for you? Things to consider when you're weighing your options between various roles that you might have available to you. Things that, as a candidate, some things that you can look for. There are red flags that you want to look out for, and we will address those with you today. And then just taking that leap of faith, and when you found something that's right, taking that leap and going ahead and moving forward in the process. Now I'll give a little bit of background information about the Hannah Resource team, who has worked very hard to provide all of these sessions over the last few weeks to you guys. First off, Mr. Ray Davis, our career transition coach. He has over 30 years as a career and job coach, 19 years in marketing and sales. He is an acquisition program support for the Right Management Company. He obtained his bachelor's from UK in business and his MBA from Ohio State. Mr. John Coffey is our director of talent acquisition. He has over 15 years in talent acquisition, 11 years in leadership within talent acquisition, 8+ years in national and global talent searching. He obtained his MBA from Ohio University and has supported hundreds of Fortune 50 to 500 companies all over the U.S. He served in many different industries, from banking to auto, information technology, engineering, legal, medical device assembly, security and public sector, industrial logistics, supply chain, corporate C-suite, staffing industry, recruiting technology, and change management consulting. Andrea Tyra is our HR coordinator. She has been an HR coordinator with Hannah Resource Group, and in 2019, she obtained her business management degree from Eastern Kentucky University, and she is currently an MBA candidate at EKU as well. Now we'll go ahead and jump on into our guest speaker, who we're so excited to have today, Mr. David Baumgartner. He's an executive coach with us today. David began in the healthcare human resources in 1995 with an organization that had 300 employees, where acquisitions ultimately grew into 17,000 employees. The last 10 years, he has served in various long-term special project roles, supporting business operations and leadership development. David is currently the coach practice manager for Premier Coaching Group, where they provide rapid deployment of research-based, cost-effective initiatives that support individuals and teams achieve results through enhanced communication, clarity, and collaboration by reducing friction that naturally comes from change or perspective difference. David has been active supporting the human resource profession. He served twice on the Bluegrass Churn Board in various capacities, including president and treasurer. He now serves on the Workforce Readiness Committee. For today's topic, we will discuss job offer decision-making, evaluating negotiating offers during uncertain times, and the importance of sustaining your search. Some of the things that we will cover are offer preparation, values and alignment, evaluating the offer, the art of negotiating, weighing multiple offers, the truth about counteroffers, and finalizing the decision and landing the job. So now, without further ado, I will go ahead and pass the mic along to our guest speaker today, Mr. David Baumgartner.
All right. Thank you, Casey, and welcome, everybody. It's a privilege to be included in this series. I've seen the host of guest speakers you've had, and it's a strong lineup, so I'm privileged to be a part of it. Thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about values and why they are important in the job offer and your job as a general rule. So if we could flick on over to the next one. So the real issue with values is to understand how they influence you and how they make you tick. So some of you, we sent out a survey, an email went out from Hannah Resources on Friday, asking some of you to complete a survey asking you describe yourself in 5 words. And so you might be thinking, what in the world does that have to do with anything? But really, when we understand values, it's not the same as morality or morals. Values is the way that we see the world. And so some of those words that people might use to describe themselves might be, I'm respectful and I like respect, or I'm a team player and I like teamwork, or integrity, and I'm a person of integrity and trust. And so those are words that kind of describe our values and who we are. And the variation or the degree of what that word might mean to me can have a difference. So what I wanted to ask is in the chat, so if you could list in the chat as you're thinking about yourself sitting here, not who you are as an employee or a spouse, if you're a spouse or a significant other or a family member, but think about some words that describe who you are, and type that in the chat if you don't mind. Somebody just say, I am trusting, respectful. So just list 5 words if you could. And maybe 5 could be a little bit much for our time period we have. 1 or 2 words maybe might be very helpful. Anybody want to jump in? There you go. Persistent, patient, dependable, forthright. Excellent. There you go. Empathetic, creative. Good, 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 good. I like that. So blunt. Whoa, I like it. It's all good. Candid, collaborative. So let's see who wants to share. So there's a couple of those ones that are intriguing, like forthright. Who wrote that? Jessica. So when you say forthright, do you mind unmuting yourself and saying, what does forthright mean to you, Jessica?
Just my level of honesty. I don't believe in sugarcoating things that don't need to be sugarcoated. I think it's very important to just be honest always. And I find that a lot of people sometimes think they're being honest, but they aren't. So for me, that's just like, you just have to be honest. You're not always going to like what you hear, but it's important to hear the truth.
Right. So excellent. So that's beautiful. So if I was somebody, Jessica, that maybe kind of came around the conversation, the side door, you might get irritated with me if we work together, huh?
Probably, but I tend to still hold myself accountable.
Right.
So while you may not feel that it's important, and that's okay, that's your prerogative, you have free will,
Right.
I'm still going to be myself. And I tend not to try to placate people and, oh yeah, okay, and I'm going to do things your way. I'm not. I'm going to still be my honest, forthright self.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you, Jessica. But so you can see there, though, how like some of these words or events for all of us, we can see how that. So I applaud Jessica because she, although her value is being forthright, if somebody kind of comes around the back door, her ability to separate herself from that is a gift, right? And so I applaud you for that. So somebody else potentially, and if you want to speak up on the chat and we can unmute you, can you think of a time, so when you think about empathetic or creative or dependable, when you see people that don't represent or wear those values, or, you know, and it could be at work or at home, those values, the way you see that, can you see how it irritates you and maybe gets under your skin? To make sense? Anybody want to chat about that? Because what happens, and here's what happens, is that values are your unwritten ways that we can get thrown off. So our ability as an individual first to define my values and understand what your 5 words are and how they describe you, that builds your foundation for being calm in the midst of stuff, right? You could be handling a project or something going on or a job interview, but the ability to understand why something's irritating and what's important to you and separate yourself from that person or that event, like Jessica's ability to do, that's important. And that creates your foundation for just being calm and being who you are. Does that make sense, everybody? Because we're going to move on then. Okay, let's cruise on there, John. So here's where values play at work. So tools like the predictive index or DISC or the Myers-Briggs, they tell us that we're different, right? But understanding the values and where we are from a values perspective, that helps us to resolve those differences. Because when we can understand my version of teamwork or my version of integrity, and realize and be able to accept the fact that other people don't see it the same, then we're able to just accept somebody for who they are, like Jessica was able to do. So for instance, if I was a person of integrity and I do my job well all the time, if I question you, like Casey, if that's a really important thing to you, you know, integrity, does somebody questioning you and your work, does that step on your integrity? Because your assumption is, I'm a person of integrity and I like doing my job. Just turn me loose and I will do my job, right? So you can see how that value of integrity by a supervisor, an organization that does a lot of questioning, how that could step on something that's very important to somebody. Make sense? So the other piece about this would be in how we would use words and understand why somebody's questioning is irritating me and how I can get past that. The other piece is if I'm a person that really likes things done to the nth degree, I like to make sure, that all the steps are followed. I'm a real process-oriented person. I want to follow all that. Is somebody who is more big picture, who creates vision, but may not follow every steps, do we think of that person as lazy? Make sense? So we can be saying in our head, oh, David's lazy, he didn't do that step, or he didn't pay attention to this, but really it's the level of, it could be integrity, the way I see integrity versus the way somebody else sees integrity, the way one person sees thoroughness and the way another person sees thoroughness, the way one person sees teamwork and the way another person sees teamwork. Does that make sense, you all? So, and again, it's another question. Is making sure all the steps are complete, is that controlling, right? So if I work with somebody or an organization who seems like they're always saying, well, what about this? And why didn't we do this? Or why didn't you do that? Or blah, 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 blah. And we're thinking, gosh, that person's a control freak. But are they really a control freak? Or is that coming from a sense of fear and not wanting to let people down? Does that make sense? And so that's where somebody who has a looser set of some pieces of life could be different than somebody else, and it comes across and we begin to label people, but it's really our value in the way we see the world. So let's, before we move on, if you could throw in the chat, are we okay? Love assessments, driven, yeah, good. There's Perry, he's one of those tough people I was following. So does that make sense, everybody, about values? Okay, nothing in, yep, good, good. All right. So anybody love Brene Brown? She's got a lot of great books out there. In one of her books, she says, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So again, Jessica's point that she brought up is she likes to be clear with folks, right? And so where this comes down for an interview perspective, and this is why we're here, is how to take this understanding of values and who you are and potentially apply that to your interview process. So in the interview, say who you are, because a lot of times in interviews, we're going to talk about the things that we've completed, the jobs that we've done, the tasks that we've completed, and so forth. And we're selling ourselves as accomplishments versus who I am from a values perspective. Make sense? And so the ability to go to somebody, a prospective employer, and say, this is what you're buying when you buy me. You buy things like, driven, collaborative, and cautious, respectful, dependent. Some of these words, blunt, you might want to soften that word blunt, but you're selling those values. That's what the employer's buying, not that task that you completed at the last employer. So the ability to say who you are and ask about the current environment in a great way is what I'm suggesting that you could do in your interview. So if you said something like, I operate with integrity and I like to solve problems. So in other words, you're going to want to find out how much they micromanage. Does it make sense? And things in that area. Because when you think about the things that step on your toes and step on who you are, you'll want to know what that looks like in the prior employer. Now, granted, trust is something that would need to be built. So if you had a new manager who will loosen the reins for you a little bit as they get to trust you, then you might have to prepare for building trust if you understood it. But to be clear with an employer about who you are and the style of freedom that you like is a big deal. Make sense? The other piece then that is a big deal in this, and it's just another angle, is if you said, I don't like making mistakes and letting people down, you might want to find out how detailed their processes are. Because if if nobody in the prospective organization is a detail-oriented person, and they're going to point to the door and say, you got to figure out how to get out the door, but not how many steps you take and all the detail that you're used to. You know, if I'm a very detail-oriented person, then not having detail will cause a lot of friction in who I am. But so the ability to understand where that's coming from for you, and then you can have intelligent questions with your prospective employer to make sure that they're buying who you are and you're going into the environment that is going to trust who you are. Make sense? That's how you use it in an interview. Like Ray, I liked Ray. What did you said something the other day, Ray, that you do with people, that you used to do with folks on interviews. Do you want to share that? Oh, I guess what'd you say?
Tell me more about what you're remembering, because
you said you might have a prospective candidate ask for some some employees that work for a particular supervisor, if you want to really know about the company.
Oh yeah, well I'll get to that later. But the whole idea is to find out more about that supervisor so that you understand how their values fit in with yours.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So next slide, Mr. John. So what I'd like you to, homework, I got some homework for you. So over the next 2 weeks, if you could look for people or events that irritate you. First of all, if you didn't do the little survey thing that they sent out asking you to do the 5 words, take time today or the next day to think about 5 words that describe you, and then try to understand them. Like you saw in the comment section there that, let's see, that Jessica, she used the word forthright. And so, and then when you ask her about that word forthright, you find out really it's an integrity and a truthful thing and so forth in that area is a base of where that is. So think about 5 words that define you and into that type of scenario. And then over the course of the next 2 weeks, look for people or events that irritate you. And then see if you can equate that to one of your words, because you can begin then to detach from that irritation. So when you have a conflict with something or irritation, even from a moving forward perspective, the ability to detach and breathe and be curious as to why something's irritating you, that would be helpful. So the more you know about each other, so once you move into an environment and your new workspace, the more you know about each other. And so if something is irritating you, stop and breathe and be curious, and maybe ask that colleague of yours, tell me about yourself. Tell me 2 words that describe you, and then you will be able to see how they come at life and what their version of life looks like, okay? And then remember, I'm not in control of anybody except myself. I can't control my wife of 30 years, my kids, my grandkids. I got 0 control over anybody except for myself. And so your ability to understand your values, align your values with your prospective employer, and then have honest conversations about that moving forward is a way to bring yourself really calm to your environment. So that's all I have. I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Ray.
Well, thank you, David. Great job. Understanding your values and learning all you can about a prospective boss's values and the values of an organization is extremely important. Now let's turn to the fun part of job search. You get an offer. And so let's move to that slide, John, and talk about it a little bit. First of all, when you get an offer, you're often elated, your emotions go up, you're getting positive vibes, but I'd like you to settle down a little bit because you have some work to do. You want to understand is this the right job for you? Is it the right company? Will your boss help you grow and improve? And are there opportunities beyond this job? And too often, because we've been on a long job search, and this is the only offer we've received, we are anxious to grab it. And I want you to hold back on that instinct. And I want you to think about negotiation. Now, success in negotiation is dependent upon knowing the situation. And too often, the only situation you think about is you. You've been out of work a long time. You've been working hard on the job search. Finally, you have an offer and you think, oh my gosh, I can't let this go. I can't afford to blow this. But I'd like you to think about another situation, the situation that the company who made the offer is in. And so that's something that most people never do think about. Here's what's happening behind the scenes at the company. Someone leaves a job and the job is open. The boss over that job goes to his or her boss and says, hey, we've got to fill this job. That boss looks back at them and says, no, let's see if we can spread that work around. Let's see if we can keep from hiring somebody new into that job. So this fellow or lady goes back and tries to do that. And after a month or 2 months, they can't get the job done. Spreading it around has caused disruption in the department. So they get the courage to go back up to the big boss and say, look, I've got to fill this job. And so all that has been going on for a couple of months. Then finally, you go to HR to get HR in the mode of finding some people, some candidates for the job. And the first thing they ask you is, do you have a job description that's up to date? Oh my gosh, I don't have a job description up to date. I have to go back and write the job description. Then HR has to evaluate it. And then finally, HR swings into action. And so they either call a recruiter or they have their in-house recruiter, but they start the process of bringing in the resumes of potential candidates. My point in telling you all this is the situation at the employer is this. They've spent a lot of time getting to you. They've made the offer to you and they don't want number 2 or number 3. So I'll bet you've never thought about this, but you are in a strong negotiating position right now. And if you can kind of quell your own fears about, oh my gosh, I've got to take this job and follow a few simple steps, we may be able to negotiate a sweeter offer for you than the one they laid on the table. So when you get the call that makes you so excited, I want you to be excited. I want you to be positive. I want you to talk about the people you've met there during the interviewing process and how you know you'll really fit in and can do the job, and let them know you really want the job. A lot of times when people are thinking about negotiating, they don't want to seem too excited because they think that'll weaken their negotiating position. But think about it. When you offer a job to someone, they want to hire somebody who really wants the job. So you're not doing anything to weaken your position. In fact, you're strengthening it. Then during the phone call, after they tell you the salary and when they'd like you to start and all that stuff, ask for it in writing with all the details, because a phone call is not an offer. Until you get the written offer with all the details about the benefits and the vacation time and health insurance and all the things that you need to know about, you don't have an offer. One thing I don't want you to do in that phone call is to make any comment about the salary offer. Don't say, wow, that's great, or anything. Just let it lie there. Now is not the time to negotiate. and it's not the time to comment on the offer. And then finally, I want you to do this. Ask for some time to consider it. And I think a week is a good amount of time. It gives you time to do some due diligence, to ask some questions, and it also is a reasonable amount of time from the employer's standpoint. Now, many employers will say to you when you say, well, wow, I'd like to get, if today's Wednesday, I'd like to get back to you next Tuesday. It'll give me time to talk it over with my spouse or with my best friend or my advisor, and I know I'll have some questions after I read through your offer. But find a way to get as much time as possible, because time is part of negotiation. The longer you can wait to give them a decision, the more the stress builds on their side that you may not take the job. And that is not something they want. So the longer you wait, the better for you. So ask for at least a week to consider the job. Now, here's where you have to go to work. I want you to, first of all, look at the job offer and all it entails and compare it to what your strengths are, and make sure you are taking a job that your strengths will make you successful at. Secondly, I want you to compare it to the criteria that you have laid down in advance during your job search, early in your job search. And if it matches up with those things, then you've got something worthwhile to consider. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to call or email the various people you've met at the company with questions. HR is the place to ask questions about the benefits. Your boss is the place to work, or your prospective boss is the place to ask questions about the job, about anything about the job. Ask about the co-workers that you might be with. You can ask a lot of different questions. And the reason for this is the more you find out about this job, the lower you take the risk when you make the change, because changing jobs is risky. And what you want to do is reduce that risk as low as possible. So the more you know, the lower the risk. And then here's the real critical place to talk to your prospective boss. Ask that person if you can have the cell phone numbers of several of the people who work for him or her. If they say no, that's a real big red warning flag. But any boss that I've ever dealt with in this situation has said yes to that and given me those phone numbers. And what I have done, and what I encourage you to do, is to make a list of 2 or 3 open-ended questions that kind of talk about the boss's behavioral style, their management style, that ask about the culture of the company, and just ask what people like and don't like about working there. Just some open-ended questions. Make notes as you talk to each of those people, and then look for consistency in the answers. And if those consistent answers line up with your values, then next step is let's negotiate to get the job. And I'm encouraging you to do something that most of you don't think about doing and don't want to do. And most people do not negotiate. They're afraid the offer will be retracted. They think that negotiating is just for executives, and I can assure you that any job outside of state government or national or federal government jobs, any private sector job is negotiable, even if they say it's not negotiable. Okay, everything's negotiable. And then, but the biggest reason people don't negotiate is they don't know how to conduct a win-win negotiation. And what I mean by win-win is when the negotiation is finished, you should be happy and the company should be happy. But so I want you to investigate win-win negotiation. It's not something we can cover in this Zoom series, but negotiation is part of life. If you're married, you're negotiating with your spouse, with your kids. Everything in life is negotiable. And it's really great to understand how to use words to get what you want, but at the same time, have a win-win situation. Okay, let's weigh some multiple offers, but before we get there, I want you to stop and think about who you should negotiate with, because this is critical. Your HR or your recruiter may insist that you talk with them about any negotiations. They are not the decision makers. The only person you should be negotiating with is your prospective boss. I want you to be diplomatic, but don't allow them to sidetrack you. Think about it. Who has the most power to get you more in that offer? Who has more to lose if you don't accept the offer? And who is the person to whom you want to demonstrate that you know how to professionally negotiate? It's not HR, it's not your recruiter, it's your prospective boss. So always keep that in mind. Now let's talk about multiple offers. I want you to let both organizations know that you have another offer. This enhances your value to both of those organizations. Everybody wants what somebody else wants. So that's just human nature, and it's honesty, and it gives you an opportunity to work through this negotiating process. Ask each of them for their patience and the time to decide. Focus on completing your due diligence quickly, because you don't want to leave the offer hanging, and you don't want to do a disservice to the company if in fact you decide not to take the job. So work quickly and compare each of those offers to your strengths and criteria. And I encourage you to quantify that decision process. Let's go to the next slide, John. You may recall that in a previous session, if you were here, we talked about comparing job offers. And I want to walk you through this again because it's a very important tool to use. We asked early on that you, before you got too deep into your job search, that you write down those criteria you're looking for in your next job. And I've got an example on the screen. This person said comparable salary, values align with the boss, stay in Kentucky, commute during the week, job security. And then the second thing to do is assign the importance weight to those, adding up to 100%. So now you've got two offers, opportunity A and opportunity B. I want you to take a rating scale of 1 meaning poor, 3 meaning okay, and 5 meaning excellent. And I want you to rate each of those criteria, how that job measures up. Let's look at opportunity A. It has a comparable salary that this person said, wow, that's an excellent salary. They give 3s to all the rest of the values, so they're okay, but not huge. Then they look at opportunity B and they go through the same rating analysis. And then what happens in this is an Excel spreadsheet. It multiplies, if you look at the first line, the first row, 30% weight times 5 is 1.5. On the opportunity B, a 30% of 1 is 0.3. So it goes through and does the ratings based on the weighting. And at the bottom each of those columns, you see a 3.6 for opportunity A and a 2 for opportunity B. Well, if you did this analysis, you might say, well, I should take opportunity A. But my advice to you is, if your gut, if your instinct says that opportunity B is the better one, I say it's trust your instincts. Remember, this is a great tool. It's a model. It is not real life. It's the best you can do at putting down in writing those things that seem to be important and how you rate them. But your brain can calculate and take into consideration so much more than a model can. And that's why I suggest you follow your instinct. But this is a great way to force yourself to think deeply about those two offers. All right, we're going to have John take it from here, and he's going to talk about the counteroffer, some considerations to do when or think about when you get an offer and your job comes back and says, wait a minute, we don't want to lose you. John?
Thanks, Ray. Wow, great points all around. So counteroffers. I'm going to give you guys just some insight to what we think about as recruiters or in talent acquisition when we extend an offer. I think the premise is that we're very excited. There's a lot of work, as Ray mentioned, behind the hood to get to a place where the company's deciding to make an offer. And so at the point that an offer gets extended, there's a lot of excitement in the office at that point because we feel like we've done right by the company. But, what ends up happening sometimes is that a current employer might swoop in with the counteroffer, and then that just sort of throws a whole monkey wrench into the system. But, one of the things that I think candidates aren't very maybe cognizant of is just really some of the facts behind counteroffers. So I'm going to kind of dive into that a little bit. I think this will kind of open up your eyes a little bit. So we know that there were some candidates on this call that may be looking to switch jobs outside of just being unemployed. So we thought we couldn't get away with not talking at least a little bit about counteroffers. So first up, 50% of candidates that resign will be counteroffered by their current employer. So if you've never been through that situation, just know it's pretty common practice. Companies get in a state of panic. They want to try to keep you, and they're going to do whatever they can to try to sweeten the deal to keep you from jumping. Now, 80% of candidates, this is the statistic that most recruiters pay attention to. 80% of candidates who actually accept a counteroffer, well, here's sort of the spoiler alert. Their current employer that is giving them that counteroffer will still see that employee leave within 6 to 12 months. Now, that could be voluntarily or that could be non-voluntarily. So what you're seeing is that counteroffer ends up becoming more of a Band-Aid than a fix because, whatever got you to that state of looking as a candidate, some of those things behind the scenes, be it, organizational change or, more workload or less recognition, those sort of cues and those values, right, that we talked about in the beginning, some of those things didn't align. So that counteroffer, they might give you a shiny new title, or they might actually offer you just a few more $1,000, but at the end of the day, is it still the right thing for you to stay? So, keep that in mind if you're somebody in that counteroffer state. Also, 50% of candidates that accept counteroffers from their current employers are actively job seeking again within 60 days. Okay, so you recognize my worth, but I wonder if there's an employer out there that's going to recognize that I'm worth a little bit more. Again, might be surprising to some of you there, but something to think about. Also, only 38% of hiring managers reported not making counteroffers. So going back to that statistic that most employers will provide some kind of a counteroffer, in the process once you've decided that you're leaving. Also, 50% of employees actually will end up accepting counteroffers. So if you look at that number, even though 80% are probably going to be out the door in 6 to 12 months, 57% actually accept them. So I'm just asking you guys to look at the statistics and the math there. Everything is situational. If you're really happy with your employer and they've just been slow moving and you can come to that, feel good agreement where you feel like they're giving you finally what you asked for, then maybe it's okay to stay. But there are definitely a lot of statistics and facts that state that counteroffers don't always end up going the direction that you think long-term they're going to go. So certainly want you guys to think about that. Now, as we get into this, you've heard a lot about values and alignment. You've heard Ray kind of give the discussion around negotiation. I think one thing that is kind of interesting now that I'm seeing with employers is that where you used to have a week to make a decision, right now in the state of a pandemic, employers are moving much faster when they're hiring, and I think that has to do with just also having maybe less staff. They need more. They're pivoting more. They're trying to be more nimble, given the state of the economy and the state of business. So where you used to have that luxury of the week, like Ray said, sometimes a recruiter or an HR person may be honest to you and say, hey, you know what, I need you to give me an answer within 24 to 48 hours. Also, a lot more candidates in the process now today. So I think certainly ask for as much time as you can, but that is one thing I think I've been noticing during just the pandemic in general that was a good call out. So when we look at finalizing your decision and landing the job, there's some things that you really need to understand at the end, and you've kind of heard this over time, but we're going to go back and reinforce a few of them. So first off, if you're in a current job and you know that things are a little bit unstable, right, and you've gone out and you're pursuing other opportunities, I think when you walk into that offer discussion, you really need to understand what type of notice you need to give. And I know that sounds silly because everybody's like, well, 2 weeks, right? Well, not necessarily. There are some roles where you may be in a higher mid-level position that is going to, your employer is going to ask you for more transition time. You may need 4 weeks based on what that company says. If you go back to when you started with them, that could have been 7, 8 years ago. They might have said, we require most of our employees to give a 3-week or an arbitrary 4 or 5 week notice. And so that's something you're going to have to discuss and know about. And then also, I think one of the things that I've had candidates ask, certainly when they move from one job directly to another, is just for maybe a week break in that. So maybe you're going to ask for a 3-week notice. 2 of those weeks you're going to, give formally to your employer, and then 1 of those weeks you're going to take a little break and just regroup, refresh, and get ready for your new opportunity. So again, think about that when you're walking into your offer. Also, Ray mentioned this, but I can't stress enough, it's not just about the salary, folks. It is about the benefits, the PTO, the 401k, the total rewards. What is the total package looking like? And then, not only that, but is it all in writing? As Ray mentioned, verbally, you're going to get an offer. They're going to discuss these things with you, but you need to make sure all that resonates on paper. And, there are also going to be some good discussions that are coming out of the dialogue in the interview process, but, some of those discussions might be, hey, we're going to promote you within 6 months of taking this opportunity. Okay, well, what does that look like? And are you willing to not let that be in writing? Because unless it's in writing, folks, it's not a guarantee, right? So promises and guarantees are 2 different things. So, is it backed by writing? Do you have a plan? And then what are you willing to accept out of that? And I think it goes with Ray's kind of mentioning of digging a little bit more into some questions. I think some of the good questions to ask are, do you have annual reviews? If you're looking to grow and get promoted, how do you know that you're doing well? Are they quarterly evaluating you? Do you have weekly one-on-ones? Do you have WOW meetings? Are you in a position where you're doing ongoing evaluations, be it annually, biannually, however that looks? How do they performance manage? How do you know that when you get in this job that you're doing a good job? I think it's important to know that before you take it, because then that way that gives you sort of that comfort level to know exactly when you're going to be having those discussions out of the gate. And so as you kind of go through this, we want you to consult this checklist really one last time. Ray had mentioned don't talk about salary right off the bat, kind of internalize that, look at it, make sure that you've reviewed everything. And then when you go back to the table to negotiate, I think the number one thing and the number one myth I see with candidates that are in a hurry to take a job is that not always is that salary appropriate for their family, right? So if you're willing to take a step back, that is okay. If you're willing to take a pay cut for another opportunity, that's okay too. But what's not okay is if that salary isn't going to be appropriate for you to live on. And so then you got to think about, do I need to take another job at Total Wine or, you know, a part-time job here to supplement my income? So those are some discussions you need to make sure that you're having with your family. So that way, when you get into that role, you're not already a disgruntled employee and saying, you know what, I think I messed up. I think I took too deep of a cut. And I just wanted to get in a place where I was working, and this just didn't work out for me. Because I think what you're going to find is you're not only wasting the employer's time at that point, but you're going to be wasting your own time. So something really want to think about. Also, there are some things that you might be sacrificing to take this role. Maybe you're going to have to travel a little bit more. Maybe you're going to do the work of 2 people versus 1. You know, there are some things that you're going to uncover in the interview process that are going to flag to you that there could be a couple of sacrifices or change aspects that you're going to need to make. And you got to really think about that. Are you willing to give those things up? Are you going to be comfortable with that? And so I think that's going to be important in the decision-making process. Also, room for growth. I think, you know, people get really happy about titles and salary, but again, is personal growth important to you? Do you want a company that is giving you constant training, development, creating opportunities for you to advance? Do they have things like management training programs and fast tracks for salespeople? You need to know what that company does for their employees, or do they expect you to just take this job and be in it for the next 10 years? And are you okay with that? So those are things that you've got to think about. And then I think as you research the company, we talked about that in the last session, you know, it's about, you know, is this going to be an improvement on things that you've done in your career? Is this company, is this industry the right industry for you? Is it a good move? Is it a logical, you know, alignment? Is the company that you're moving to, are they financially stable? How does their balance sheet look? You know, have they put out any press releases? Have they laid off folks recently? You know, as part of the reason why they're hiring is, you know, they're trying to get out some of the old guard that have high salaries and put in the new guard that are going to work harder for lower salaries, right? So again, things you need to think about and make sure you do your research on companies. And then I think at the end of the day, like Ray said, you want to have a good gut feeling about your boss or coworkers. So if you can't get their cell phone numbers, I think following up and seeing if you can have an additional discussion just to talk through a couple of things that you have. Again, you know, try to get as much information as you can is what we're saying before you take that final step. And I think lastly, what also I think is a myth with candidates sometimes that we talk a lot about in talent acquisition, especially in modern approach to talent acquisition today, is that recruiters and HR folks really at the right organizations are going to want to make sure that you're having a good experience along the way. Why? Because it's a reflection of the company, right? We want to make sure that this is a place that you're going to talk to your friends about, that you're having a good experience before you even become an employee. And maybe you won't, but we want you to be treated with that white glove experience. And if you're getting flags along the way that you're not being treated well, or you're hearing things that maybe you didn't expect to hear, you know, you need to think about that, because that is the reflection of your candidate experience, how you were treated in the process, and thinking internally about, would you recommend this interview process, all the hoops that you had to jump through, right, to get to the offer at the end of it? Would you recommend that to somebody else? And really kind of think about that, because that might be indicative of how the company is going to treat you, right? So if they're treating you really well, that's a good sign. You should be happy about that. If there's some things that kind of feel a little off, then maybe you need to get some confirmation there, is what we're saying. Also, you know, you really should have a level of genuine excitement. Like Ray said, you know, job seeking is a long process. You've got a lot of things to go through and think about, but at the end of the day, is this really an exciting opportunity for you? And by exciting, it's not just because they brought it to you and they said, we will give you an offer, but is this what you want to do? And also, you know, do you feel good about taking the leap? That's what's really important here. And we want you to feel really confident about that decision. So we have some additional homework on top of what David had. And it really is just kind of tying together a lot of the things in the series throughout. So, you know, definitely want you to complete the values and alignment homework that David brought. But we're asking that as you evaluate your offers, do your due diligence, maximize the negotiation process, right? Make sure that you haven't left anything on the table and you feel good about the final product of the offer. And then weigh that against some of the others that you might have. And I'll tell you that one thing that I hear from candidates often is that, you know, I have another offer on the table, but this is the most important opportunity to me. So some of those times offers don't really align. You wish that you got both of those offers on Monday and you could make the decision on Friday. So you're going to have some work on your end to really think about which offer am I most excited about, and am I willing to risk giving up an offer from another company for an opportunity? And that's scary, I know, but you really got to think about what's right for you, because if you're doing this process and you're finding success, chances are high you're going to continue to find success, and you need to hear that. So I'm going to tell you something else that you need to hear, that you might be qualified for a job, but that doesn't mean that that job's right for you. So just whatever you're thinking about in your homework assignment, I want you to really process that you might be qualified for the job, but is it the right job for you? And think carefully about your goals. If it is a counteroffer scenario, make sure that that lines up, and then consult that checklist one last time. And then at the end of the day, we know that you're going to either have to take the leap or it's okay if you got to keep looking. So that is everything I have. Casey and Andrea, do we have any questions?
I haven't had any that have come through so far.
If we have anyone on the call that does have any questions, you can go ahead and submit those down below and we'll try to get those addressed before we conclude today.
Or you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask that way as well.
Okay. Well, as always, if there's no further questions, we want to thank each and every one of you for joining us along this journey over the last few weeks. We hope that the sessions have been very insightful and that you feel more equipped to start your job hunting and rejoining the workforce. As mentioned, all of the sessions that have taken place over the last few weeks have been recorded and are available on hannahresource.com. The session today should be uploaded within 24 to 48 hours to view for this session. Please stay in touch with us. If you have any further questions, you can reach out to John or Ray, and their contact information is on this next slide. So it's just john@hannahresource.com or ray@hannahresource.com. So if you have any questions, anything you think about once we conclude, if you have some questions about a past session, anything, feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. And I hope that you all have a wonderful day and happy job hunting.